Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Aquas Cafe in historic downtown Petaluma, located at 2nd and H Street, and it's the second Tuesday of every month. I'm David Glass, the mayor of Petaluma, and this is one of the things that I enjoy, is a chance to be out in the community, talk to folks about what's going on in our town, and talk about vital issues in this community. And before we get to our guests on this edition of the program, our additional guests, because we have all sorts of guests today. Stephen Koza was with us just moments ago, and later we'll be visiting the animal shelter, and you'll see some great guests at the animal shelter, I promise, because the dogs are lovable. And but with us today is Ingrid Alberti, the Economic Development Director from the City of Petaluma, and also James Burleson, who is a president of the Fair Board, and we're going to talk to them about the future of that parcel and what the fairgrounds potentially could mean to quality of life in Petaluma as well as economic development. But before we get to that, I do want to bring you up to date with what happened at City Hall and the necessity for going forward with a garbage contract that was extended by the City Council. In my opinion, this was one of the better deals, and I congratulate our garbage service provider and the city staff for getting together and coming to terms. And yes, the city gave up something of real value. That was an extension of an existing contract for a period of 10 additional years, but the city also received tremendous value in exchange, and the city will receive $500,000 on deposit immediately upon that contract going into effect, and the city will receive $500,000 on an annual basis every year that it's in effect. And should the contract be sold to another service provider, the city would receive compensation of an additional $500,000. The trucks that work in Petaluma are the best in the county. That fleet of trucks is guaranteed to be protected, and it stays in Petaluma. The service will continue to be good as it has been, and as your mayor, I know when service falls. I know when people are complaining and people are satisfied with the service, and that entered into my decision to support the extension of that contract. The city also gained the ability to continue monitoring the services and make sure that the city does indeed receive a fair rate of return on the franchise fees, in addition to which the garbage service provider did not implement a $410,000 rate adjustment that they could have implemented, and instead wound up passing on to the ratepayer a surcharge of $250,000 that will be absorbed by about 20,000 contracts in the city, that will allow us actually to do street repair work that will replenish our streets almost to the condition that the service itself, with running the heavy garbage trucks over the city streets, degrades our infrastructure. So it's something that is fiscally responsible. It's something that I've campaigned for and advocated for, and I congratulate John Brown, our city manager, and the city staff that negotiated a deal that, from my experience, was far better than my last experience when I saw the city council get involved back in 2005, when the process just came unraveled in ways that I still don't understand, when council members voted to more than double your garbage rates. So I'm happy with what the city staff did. I'm happy with the fact that we did not have, in this case, a bid contract that would have gone out at the discretion of the city council. We would have, in fact, had to wait till 2016 to have that process. And the fact is, we need money, and we need it today to shore up our general fund. And with that extension of the garbage service contract, we did get richly rewarded. And it's the best extension of services in all of Sonoma County, and that's just a fact. You could look it up, as Casey Stengel used to say. So with us now, when the city looks for economic vitality in our community, we're looking at a golden opportunity. We're looking at 64 acres at East Washington and Highway 101 approximately, adjacent to what will become the Regency Shopping Center. And that's a parcel that, when it was first identified as a fairground site, was so far out in Timbuktu that the leaders in the city of Petaluma gave little thought to long-term leases. And they signed a 50-year lease as recently as 1973 at $1 a year. Well, I think everybody realizes $1 a year is not going to be a fair and just compensation for the city of Petaluma that does need two things: quality of life and money. And so with that, let's talk to the Economic Development Director first, and welcome Ingrid Alberti to the program. How are you doing, Ingrid?
I'm doing well, thanks.
You've been in Petaluma now for how long?
About a year and a half.
And when you came, it seemed like as soon as you came, something called redevelopment, which was the economic engine that cities counted on to drive projects and move forward and achieve economic vitality in the community, became vulnerable, and in fact at this time has now been disbanded by the state of California.
That's true. We spent the better part of last year unwinding Petaluma's redevelopment agency and undoing probably the most important and strong economic development tool that we had. So one, it took a lot of time away from other economic development efforts, and two, it sadly takes a lot of ability and a lot of funds for future economic development.
Okay, so when you look at an opportunity and you see 64 blank acres, essentially blank. I mean, I know the fairgrounds is there right now, but there's an opportunity, whether it's the fairgrounds, the city of Petaluma, and we know, let's face it, in Petaluma, this is going to wind up being a partnership of the two entities. What does that represent, though, in terms of a thought process at City Hall from a staff member's perspective?
Well, I think actually really importantly, even before I came here, the council and the city did a tremendous effort to put together an economic development strategy. And that strategy, even back then, foresaw this site as an opportunity site of some sort of development. And I think what's so exciting about this opportunity is that the groundwork's already laid, and that the goal is to identify opportunities for the site that support the goals of the fair and keeping a fair in place, which is an excellent attraction for the city, and also trying to add additional uses to attract either tourists or more development that might bring more revenues to the city.
And let's meet James Burleson, who is the president of the Fair Board. James, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Okay, so now you have a background. Let's talk about your background. First of all, in economics. So you understand economics to a high degree. Tell us what you do professionally.
I run a small money management firm here in Petaluma.
And so let's take a look at this project and, you know, economically what it has to achieve, not only for the fair, but for the city itself. But what about quality of life? Because that factors into it. And what about people's hearts and where they want to see, and the passion and the history of that particular parcel, and the history of the fair itself and the agricultural roots in Sonoma County, and particularly in Petaluma?
Well, you know, the fair is it's a lifelong tradition, and, you know, the deep roots of agriculture in Sonoma County really can't be argued. You know, being appointed by the governor, it's our mission to support that agricultural history and also support the youth and educating them about our great agricultural history. You know, the fairgrounds, as you said, David, when it was first started, it was on the outskirts of town. No one can argue that it's not a jewel. What we need to do going forward is figure out how the fairgrounds and the city of Petaluma can partner in order to extract that value. I know the Fair Board, you know, our mission is, again, to serve youth in agriculture. But if we can come up with a plan with the city to partner and provide access to our citizens, to provide access to all the people that live in Marin and Sonoma County, because that is the 4th agricultural district, and then in that, encapsulate within that opportunities for revenue, then I think the fair wins because we keep our tradition and we keep that space, that golden space in the center of our town. But the city also can be very prosperous in the equation too.
So when you look at this, Ingrid, how do you see this playing out as far as a process? An economic development director, I know that you're out there trying to court and bring businesses to Petaluma all the time, and we started out with huge vacancy rates in the business parks and whatnot. What about the attraction of this parcel? What could it become that would be a magnet that would help the business community, for instance, fill up the vacancies that exist in this town?
Well, I think one of the things that I've heard about a lot since I've been here, and actually in going back to the strategy, I see that pointed out, is that part as was already brought up, the jewel of the agricultural history here in Petaluma. And one thing that's risen to the top is the strength of our food processors and our agricultural support, and really highlighting that as the specialty food area Sonoma has become. Petaluma is the gateway to Sonoma, and we definitely could take more advantage of that industry and bringing tourists here to celebrate in that industry, and also helping build local businesses as well. So it could be a site for some kind of demonstration area for either food manufacturing, food production, some kind of food specialty thing that tourists might attend. like I said, I know of a number of businesses that are looking already in Petaluma for such spaces and might benefit from some kind of attraction where they could, one, produce their food in support of locally made food, but also promote that as something to share, like in terms of the educational value that he was talking about. I think those are some of the things that might come up in terms of an attraction option.
It's important for the community to recognize as we have this discussion that nothing definitive is going to be decided here, not between you and me, and even as mayor, I don't have that authority to speak actually for a city council. But as you listen to food processing, and that would be agricultural uses, what reception would that get inside of the agricultural community? That is there room there to pursue and look at something along those lines?
You know, the great thing about the fairgrounds is that it is 64 acres. And all 64 acres are not utilized every day. So there's great opportunity on those 64 acres to do such things as food processing. You know what we face down at the fairgrounds is, as you've lost your redevelopment dollars, we've lost our dollars too at the fair. And so we have to look at ways in order, not to make money at the fairgrounds, but to survive. Pat Conklin, who's the CEO, she's done just a wonderful job of being fiscally responsible. And I think we are rated one of the top fairs because of her fiscal responsibility. But what we realize is that, Live Oak Charter School is down at the fairgrounds. It's a great opportunity for children. We provide a great service to them, but, it's 20,000 square feet at roughly, 25, 30 cents a square foot. We can't put in a food processing facility and charge those type of rents. The reason we have to charge those type of rents is because the $64,000 question, we have a limited time of being at the fairgrounds. So the public, these entities, aren't willing to invest in the fairgrounds to provide that revenue. Whether we put somebody in and we share revenue with the city, which I think is a fantastic idea, we can't, it's kind of like the chicken and the egg. And being in Petaluma, we all know about the chicken and the egg, right? We have to figure out a way to make people commit to the fairgrounds and commit to the infrastructure. It's all on the city and the fair now, because the state really is not providing those subsidies anymore. So that's the dialogue that we have to have, is how do we get, I know that David, you've spoke before that, Strauss was interested in the fairgrounds and things like that, but how do we get a great company like that to come to the fairgrounds and do something if the lease is for only 10 years? That's the constant conundrum that we have.
One of the challenges, and I've looked back on the history of this, I read a lot in the last month, and looking back through it, and you see, you don't want to repeat the same mistakes that have been made in the past. Yogi Berra was famous for saying, learn me your experiences. So I'll go back through and I look at this, and in 1973, there's a 50-year lease that is signed. By 1975, the city is already in dire straits regretting that lease, and as you look through, and actually court records in some cases, because there were court lawsuits in the 1990s, and what is being referenced over and over is the fact that the city signed away complete control of that property, and as such, they would have to live out the consequences of that for 50 years at $1 a year. Right. Now, I'm not one that wants to repeat past mistakes, and I think that was a mistake that I can't put myself in the position. I try to think, what on earth were they thinking when they signed away complete control on that property? People that live here, grew up here, and have been here for generations tell me you got to put it in perspective that property was in Timbuktu.
Right.
So if you do that, you, I guess, can say, okay.
Swallow a little bit more.
But it's not in Timbuktu anymore, and the city would be foolish to sign away complete control of a property for an extended period of time. So I don't see a challenge getting a long lease as long as there's protections where the city has control, and I don't mean in a forbearing manner, but the city has to have input, can never repeat that mistake again, and $1 a year simply, you obviously recognize that ain't going to cut it.
Yeah. David, the past, we look at the past, and I truly believe we have to put it in our back pocket. It's 2013. We have people on the city council, people on the fair board. We're not going to be there in 15 years. We're not going to be those people from 1973. But we just have a unique opportunity today to look forward. And when we look forward, we see the opportunities that we're talking about now. I think that everybody has to be realistic. You know, it is not a us versus them. It's we're a tenant, you're the landlord. How do we work together to prosper? And you know, that's really the crux of it all. No one expects not to share revenue. No one expects complete control. So as long as we have a footprint of what we're going to do, what I don't want to have happen, David, is I don't want to have where we keep thinking of ideas, you know, a cheesemaker, sporting fields. We have ideas, but we have no action because we're afraid to act. The lease is a 10-year period now. Right now, we can think big and make something really special happen. And I'm just excited about it. I'm truly excited.
There is, in the general plan, 20 acres set aside on this parcel as it stands right now in the general plan that would be parks.
Right.
I don't know if that's the right number or not. I don't know if something happens here that allows the city to build parks somewhere else. You certainly have a young child that is in the Little League. I know you love parks. I know, so you know where I'm getting to.
I know.
We have the best Little League team in the Western United States, and we have nowhere for those kids to go to play ball next year. I mean, that is a crime against a generation.
You know what? It truly is. You know, if you look at the general plan, you know, you pull it up on the computer and it's in a PDF and you just search fairgrounds. Fairgrounds comes up about 8 times. About 5 or 6 times it comes up as an opportunity for retail development. That's what the general plan calls for in the fairgrounds. 2 times it comes up as playing fields for the youth. You know, I couldn't imagine a better equation of the mission of the fair and playing fields for the youth of not Little League. Granted, I'm totally biased toward Little League, but for the soccer. You know, we have such a lack of soccer and lacrosse fields, and that's the demographic that's truly growing in our community. For, you know, those little boys that went back, well, they're not little boys, they're young men that went back and played for the Little League this year back in Williamsport, they truly don't have a juniors field to play on in our town. You know, they go somewhere else to do that. The fairgrounds has the opportunity to do that. And it has the opportunity to do it with if we can have private enterprise come in and develop these facilities, and then we share revenue with them. You know, the whole travel baseball, the traveling lacrosse, the United, the SCA soccer, you know, there's just not enough places for those entities in our town. And the fairgrounds has the space. You know, in the general plan, it talks about retail development down there. You know, that's tough for me because we have a lot of stuff going in right now. We have a Jewel, we have this open space, but there are ways. You know, we did some master planning back in 2003, the fair, and we've come up with many ideas of convention center, of this, of that. But again, it all comes back to what is the best use for our citizens. And you know, one more second. We talked. Okay, we talked. You know, the way we look at it is it's revenue and access. Those are my 2 buzzwords, and I've told you that before. If we can provide access to our citizens and we can provide revenue to share with the city, then I think we have a winning equation.
Okay, now don't take this wrong, okay? Because a piece of me, I mean, I have been a journalist in the past, okay? So you got to ask the questions, and you're the president of the Fair Board, and I'm looking back on history, because if you don't look at history, you're doomed to repeat it. But we go back into this complete control of the parcel, and we go to 1991, and you talk about not wanting retail on the site, and yet the fair directors at that time, and thank God you're not them, but they wanted to put in what amounted to a flea market on that site, and it would have exacerbated traffic on East Washington 8 to 20%. It actually went to a court, And so that's a scenario that we can't repeat. And I don't think for in a million years that you and I would repeat that scenario.
Right.
But as you mentioned, we're not going to be here for the duration of a lease. So that's what the city, from the city's interest, needs to protect itself, that we have adequate measures put into place that when we come to an agreement, and I think we will, that it's an agreement that everybody can win with and everybody will prosper with, and that the vision of the best interests of this community, whether it's an amenity of parks or it's a revenue stream or what it is, and I don't want to see it be retail. I'll be honest with you, I don't want to see that. I think that we're saturated with retail. In fact, my biggest fear is that we're oversaturated with retail, and the studies would back that up, because we reached a saturation point first with the Target Regency project and then exceeded it with the Deer Creek project. So it's going to take a long time in this day of internet sales coming on and taking on more retail sales to absorb what we've already approved. So I don't want to see that at that site. I don't want you to think that's where I'm going. I want to see what's the best amenity and the best bang for the buck for the kids of this community, for people that want to recreate and for people that want to enjoy the parcel and get an adequate, fair revenue rate of return for the city, because that's my job.
Right. And you know what? I don't think that there's anybody in this room or on the Fair Board that would disagree with you. I truly don't. There can be a really fair conclusion. When it comes to control, that's such a hard word, control. How the Fair Board truly controls those 64 acres. Our auditing authority, for lack of a better way of putting it, is the state of California. If we want to build something there, we go through a strenuous process, but it's through the state. It's not through the city. That's something that definitely needs to change. The fairgrounds, you're the landlord, we're the tenant. If control is the issue, well, then we have to work out a way to figure out what makes the most sense.
And understand when I say that, I'm not saying it from a standpoint of wanting to be, a control freak. What I'm saying is from a standpoint of wanting to protect the interests of this community, that when you and I are gone and we get 30 years into this 50-year agreement, and I think there'll be one that'll be struck, that people will look back and say about that agreement that it made sense for the community. And that's, I know, is Ingrid's goal, I know that's John Brown's goal, and I know personally it is your goal, because I know from talking to you. So the question becomes, as an economic development director, how do we achieve that?
Well, I think you have to separate two issues. You have to separate the lease from the uses, and you have to kind of look through the lease terms and develop a lease that creates fairness and creates some of those terms that we talk about, but put some numbers and some values to that so everyone has clarity. And then you also look at the uses on the site and come up with a process for developing a use scenario. The strategy talks about a master planning. It sounds like some planning's been done, but maybe those plans don't make sense in the scheme of the new retail. And I think it would make a lot of sense to kind of relook at the master planning, really have a cooperative effort where everyone kind of like you said, thinks big, looks at this great opportunity. It's now in the middle of town, and what can we do with that? How can we attract business? How can we fuel the rest of our economy and support the community, attract tourists and things that will add to the community and help us provide those services? And it sounds to me truly like the folks that are here are really set to do that. So I'm very excited about the opportunity to kind of dig into that process and see what that location, how it responds to the market in today's market. Because, even 10 years ago, a real estate market has changed so much. Even in 10 years, I think we would learn a lot going through the process, together as a team and looking through those issues. And so again, it was sort of separating the use issues in terms of what physically is on the site and the lease issues in terms of who makes the decisions, how's the revenue shared, and those kind of things. Because I think, again, you have to build in some flexibility, because it's very hard to anticipate what's going to happen 50 years from now, even 10 years from now, even 5. So flexibility would be key, I think, as well.
Assurance, stability, and flexibility. Vote for me and we'll achieve all. No, I'm kidding. Okay, so I try to add a light touch to this, but what I want to do is I want to say, is there anything that you want to add? Because I don't want you to feel like you've been tattooed to the wall here.
No, not at all. This is, I'll be quite honest with you, I was nervous coming down here tonight. And, this has been a very productive conversation. I was doing a little bit of homework on you, David, before I came. And
But if you read what's printed in the newspaper, it's all inaccurate.
but what if it's printed on your website? Okay, so
Okay.
So on the Vote for David Glass website, I was shocked and amazed and so happy that right there in the middle of the website, there's an editorial headline that John Burns wrote, I think in July or June of 2009, and it's talking about let's get this fair negotiations going. It's right there on your website. Those editorials have been written about every 3 years. You know, why isn't anything happening? Why are we letting this jewel that we all agree decay and decay and decay? Because we just don't have the infrastructure money because of the lack of support, because of the lease. One more second. But if you look at your website, that was 2009. It's 2013. We have so much opportunity, and we really, really should sit down and really hammer something out.
We're waiting for the right time for you to come along. See? No, I'm perfectly fine with talking about, and I'm perfectly fine with extending the lease, because if the truth be known, I would have extended that lease for 50 years on August 6th of 2006, when Merritt Polson offered to build a $20 million sports facility out there. I mean, that's the truth. I would have done it for
I
that.
agree.
And so it isn't that I don't want to extend the fairgrounds lease. It's that I want it, when it is extended, to be around the type of discussion that we've had here today.
Right.
So
We would have all loved for that baseball field to be there.
I know you would have.
We would have all loved for that baseball field to be there. You know, again, though, it's 2013. We have different people in the room. You know, we got to look forward and we have to think big.
Okay, so here's the thing. Never be nervous about coming in today. Because, okay, what I'm going
I
to
can
do...
never be nervous with Crowley over there.
I'm going to let you have your say no matter what, okay? I actually would like to have on this program people that come in and disagree, and we could just air it out and say, here it is. And I've made that public invitation to many people that actually very strongly disagree with me, because I do know why it is I say what it is when I say it. Now, to know what I was thinking on a day in 2009 when I would have put an editorial from John Burns on my website is beyond me, but thank you for telling me John Burns wrote the editorial, because...
Well, I think it's John Burns. I'm just making that assumption.
Oh, see, I never know who writes the editorial.
I don't either. I actually asked somebody, who writes the editorials? Someone said John Burns. I honestly don't know who wrote the editorial.
Me neither.
But it's on your website.
Okay. We'll go and look at the website and see what's there. Thank you. I enjoyed the talk. I really, truly did. Is there anything else you want to add before we go?
Well, we'll bring the lease down next week, and you guys can take a look. No, I'm just joking.
That's fine. That's better than what happened in 2008. You and I both know. Yes, they did bring a lease to City Hall, July 21st of 2008, and it called for a renewal at $1 a year for 50 years. And that's a lease that I don't think I would want to re-up on, and the city did not. And so I'm glad we did not. I'm glad we had the talk with James Burleson. I'm glad that we can have the talk with people that are in charge of the negotiation process going forward at this time. And we had some fun kidding each other back and forth. So are you going to then, now that you've read my website, endorse me since you said you were pleasantly surprised? Unfair question. Thank you. Thank you, Ingrid.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, all the questions aren't going to be fair, okay? That's fair game. Thank you very much for being here. Yeah, appreciate it a lot. All right, so do we have any time left? I think that probably is about it for tonight, but